The moment Anna Morozova hit the mat, laughter exploded around her like a grenade. It wasn't the first time she'd felt humiliation. But this was different. Apex Jiu-Jitsu Academy, the most elite martial arts school in Boston, fell into an eerie silence seconds before the instructor, Boris Trofimov, swept Anna's legs out from under her during a demonstration. "Girls like you should be in a spin class," he smirked, standing over her as she struggled to catch her breath. "Not rolling on these mats." He didn't help her up. His black belt, tied around his waist in a perfect knot, gleamed under the overhead lights. His students, young, hungry, eager for his approval, chuckled nervously and lifted their phones to record. Some didn't bother hiding it. Anna lay there for a moment, silent, still. No one noticed her calloused hands. No one saw the steel in her eyes. They were all too busy laughing. She pushed herself up, slowly, calmly, and as she rose, a small metallic tag slid from under her gi and hit the floor with a soft clink. An old military dog tag. She tucked it back in beneath her collar without a word, stood tall, and looked Boris dead in the eye. Her voice, steady and quiet, cut through the heavy air. "Some people should know their limits." Boris sneered and turned to the class. "That's right, know your limits." He didn't realize he had just tried to humiliate the wrong woman. Where were you, the viewer, at that moment? Watching from the back of the gym? Seeing it unfold through a phone screen? Were you one of the students laughing? Or maybe just like us, an observer, about to witness the unraveling of pride, the rise of something far greater? Anna's journey from this moment of public disgrace to the truth that would be revealed later is a story of quiet strength, of steel beneath silence, of a will shaped not in the comfort of mats, but in war. Anna's apartment on Sapphire Street in Dorchester was as plain as the neighborhood itself. 2 bedrooms, brick walls, no frills, the kind of place no one would look at twice. That was exactly why she chose it. No one here asked questions. No one cared. That anonymity had been precious since her discharge from the Marine Corps. Her apartment was tidy, a couch with wooden arms, a wobbly dinner table, a bookshelf overstuffed with medical textbooks and war memoirs. One photo, framed and worn, her father in his Marine blues. Next to it, a box of medals and the dog tags she now wore every day. His, now hers. The walls were thin. She could hear her neighbor's television most nights, but she didn't mind. That background hum, those muffled voices, kept her mind from wandering back to darker places. She still woke before sunrise. Always, no matter what. Discipline wasn't a switch. It was a scar. Permanent. She brewed black coffee on a small burner, sipped it by the window, and watched the city wake up. Commuters rushed toward the Ashmont station, exhaust fogging their breath. Life moving forward. Anna's life had changed 4 years ago. 8 years of service. Then a roadside explosion in Afghanistan. Shrapnel had torn through her right shoulder. The scars were jagged, hidden beneath her GI now. The pain never fully left. She had been a close combat instructor in the Corps. A fighter. Respected. Feared. The discharge came fast. Medical. The adjustment came slow. Civilian life. Her husband, Dennis, couldn't adapt. He grew distant. Cold. When he left, his last words stayed with her. "You need to let go of who you were and figure out who you are now." Maybe he was right. She never argued, never begged, just stood by the door and watched him go. The divorce was finalized 6 months ago. About the same time she stepped through the glass doors of Apex Jiu-Jitsu for the first time. It was a sharp contrast. Her rehab job at the Veterans Center in Jamaica Plain gave her purpose. She was a gifted physiotherapist, quiet, focused. Her patients trusted her. She never spoke of her past, but they felt it in her presence. Apex was something else entirely. Located in a renovated warehouse in a wealthy district, it was polished, sleek, expensive. A world away from her simple life. Boris Trofimov was the head instructor, former MMA regional fighter, built like a statue, charismatic in the way that powerful men often are, until you question them. He wore his black belt like a crown, demanded reverence, and offered none. When Anna had first asked about beginner classes, he looked her up and down. Average build, older than most newcomers. "We have some women," he said, like it was a favor. But this isn't cardio kickboxing. She nodded, paid the registration fee, and showed up to class. 3 nights a week, always early, always silent. She trained hard, focused, diligent. Her body remembered faster than the others. Balance, pressure, timing. She didn't talk. She didn't show off. But even then, she stood out. Not because she wanted to, because she couldn't help it. Tension built slowly over weeks. It started when she corrected a training partner's grip mid-class. Gently, discreetly. Boris noticed. "If you know so much, Morozova, maybe you should be teaching," he snapped in front of everyone. Anna apologized and stepped back. But the damage was done. She had disrupted the order. He waited for his moment, and today he took it. She had just been moved into the advanced class. It was supposed to be a sign of progress. Instead, he turned it into a stage. "Demonstration time," he called. "Anna, come forward." She stepped onto the mat. No hesitation. He told the class he was demonstrating a takedown defense. Then he swept her leg. No defense, no setup, just brute force. She hit the mat hard, the wind knocked from her lungs. The crowd laughed. "Thank you for the demonstration," she said, bowing slightly. No sarcasm, just dignity. His smile widened. "That's why proper training matters," he told the class. "Some people just don't belong." A girl named Claire leaned over and whispered, just loud enough, "This is what happens when soccer moms think they're fighters." Laughter again. Anna endured the rest of class in silence. Every movement sharp, controlled, perfect. When it was time for sparring, Boris excluded her. "Maybe sit this one out," he said. "You might learn something watching." She watched. Every movement, every mistake, every overextension. She wasn't just watching, she was studying. After class, as students hit the showers, Boris approached again. "The mats need cleaning. You're not using them properly anyway." He tossed a bottle of spray and a rag at her feet, then walked away. She waited for the room to empty. Then she cleaned, quietly, thoroughly, without complaint. It wasn't the worst thing she'd had to do. In war, there were worse things than sweat on mats. From the shadows, someone watched her. Natasha Morozova, owner of Apex. No relation to Anna. A businesswoman first. Martial artist second. Cold eyes, silver hair. Unsmiling. She stepped from her office as Anna scrubbed the floor. "Anna, right?" she said. "Got a minute?" Anna stood at attention without thinking. Natasha noticed. In her office, Natasha folded her fingers on the desk. "Boris has expressed concerns about your place in our program." Anna said nothing. "At Apex, reputation matters. Our clients expect a high level of professionalism. We don't hand out belts like candy." "I understand," Anna replied. Natasha sighed. "There's a women's beginner class, Tuesdays and Thursdays. You might find it more comfortable." Anna didn't flinch. "With respect, ma'am, I paid for the advanced course." Natasha's lips tightened. "There's a new fee structure, $60 extra a month for advanced students." "Understood," Anna said. "It will be in my next payment." Natasha blinked. "Also, I need you to sign this." She pushed a release form across the table. "Marketing permission." Anna read it carefully. It allowed Apex to use any footage, any from classes. She thought of the video from today, of her on the ground, of that laughter. She signed anyway. Her signature was as calm as her expression. The following week, printed screenshots of her fall appeared on the bulletin board. Caption, "Technical error." Students avoided her. No one partnered with her. Even her gear was moved to a spot near the bathroom. "She's not helpful," someone said during partner assignments. Loudly. When visitors toured the gym, Boris used her as an example of poor technique. "This is what not to do," he said. And when she corrected nothing, just stayed silent, he grew bolder. "Some people just don't get it, no matter how long they're here." It didn't stop in the gym. At an open session with other academies, no one would pair with her. At a nearby cafe, she overheard two students mocking her armbar attempts. She stood behind them silently. They froze when they saw her, said nothing, didn't apologize. The barista handed her a free espresso. "Don't let them break you," she whispered. It bled into her life. Her ex-husband messaged her. "I saw the video. This is why I couldn't stay. You never know when to quit. She stared at the message, then deleted it without replying. At work, a patient requested a different therapist. He'd seen the video. Even her landlord confronted her. No violence in the courtyard, he said. There are children here. And yet, she stayed. She trained harder, quietly. At home, she pushed furniture aside and drilled solo. What they didn't know, twice a week she trained at a community center in Dorchester, under James Wilson, retired Master Sergeant, Marine Corps. He recognized her at the VA. Your shoulders give you away, he said. You're one of us. She told him about jiu-jitsu. He grinned. Good choice. Join us. It's real training. No egos. Under him, she advanced fast. He knew she was holding back an apex on purpose. Sometimes being underestimated is your greatest weapon, he said. But sooner or later, you'll have to decide when to show them who you really are. That moment was coming. The day of the Boston Open dawned cold and still. A thin mist clung to the edges of the city like hesitation, refusing to burn off in the pale morning light. Anna Morozova was already awake, seated at the edge of her bed in her small Dorchester apartment, staring at the worn set of dog tags resting quietly in her palm. Her father's. The only item that had remained with her through boot camp, war, surgery, and the wreckage that came afterward. They clinked softly as she wrapped them in her fist and pressed them to her sternum. She'd tucked them under her tournament GI, over her heart where they belonged. She dressed with the methodical efficiency of a soldier preparing for deployment. Not a thread out of place. Every fold, every strap, every loop had purpose. It wasn't vanity, it was ritual. Her mind locked into mission focus, her thoughts narrowing to nothing but breath, balance, and timing. When she stepped out onto the street and into the weak sunlight, Boston felt quiet, reverent, as if the city itself understood what this day would mean. The Boston Open wasn't just a tournament. It was a proving ground. Regional academies came to stake their pride, their hierarchy, their dominance. Apex had always performed well here. Boris Trofimov had medaled 3 times. His favored students walked tall at these events, basking in the shine of his legacy. Anna arrived early at the convention center, a towering complex of glass and steel overlooking the harbor. Inside, volunteers arranged mats, checked brackets, and set up check-in stations. The smell of disinfectant mixed with chalk, sweat, and coffee. She saw them before they saw her, the Apex team, clustered near the front desk. Boris stood at the center, barking strategy and instructions like a general addressing troops. Claire lingered beside him, leaning in, laughing too loudly at his jokes. When she noticed Anna, her smile turned smug. Anna approached. No one acknowledged her. Boris continued talking as though she didn't exist. She waited, arms folded, gaze steady. Finally, Claire broke the silence. Oh, hey, Anna. This huddle's for the real competitors. You might want to stretch somewhere else. Slayson, one of the brown belts, grinned. Boris doesn't want distractions today. Anna nodded once and walked away without a word. She found a quiet corner near a side mat, the kind reserved for warm-ups, gear checks, and those who didn't belong anywhere else. It suited her fine. She sat cross-legged and began breathing exercises. Inhale 4 seconds, hold, exhale 8. Again, again. Find the stillness. The chaos would come later. As she stretched, she watched Boris closely. His coaching style was animated, masculine, loud. He clapped backs, shouted names, barked encouragement. To the men, the women received passing comments, surface-level tips. Claire, a purple belt with flashy moves and brittle confidence, basked in his attention. Her first match was sloppy but effective. She won. In the semifinals, she lost by triangle choke and came off the mat in tears. Boris embraced her theatrically. They robbed you, he announced, loud enough for the judges nearby to hear. Anna said nothing, just kept watching. The morning wore on. The crowd thickened. Spectators, coaches, family. The arena pulsed with energy. Calls rang out from loudspeakers. Blue belt female division. Check in now. Anna rose, rolled her shoulders, and headed toward the registration table. And then the air changed. "Attention all competitors," a voice announced over the speakers. "Due to a last-minute medical withdrawal, an open slot has become available in the men's black belt division. As per tournament rules, the next alternate has been selected. Will Anna Morozova please report to the check-in desk?" The crowd murmured. Heads turned. Boris turned scarlet. "That's impossible," he snapped. "She's not a black belt. She's a white belt in my academy." Anna walked calmly to the desk, where a senior event coordinator waited, a woman in her 60s with cropped silver hair and a no-nonsense demeanor. She held a clipboard, flipping through the forms. "Miss Morozova, you were submitted as an alternate for the expert division," she said. "Signed by one Sergeant James Wilson, credentialed black belt and instructor. He verified your qualifications." "Wait just a damn second," Boris growled, pushing through the onlookers. "That's not valid. She forged something. Or tricked someone." The coordinator raised an eyebrow. "Sir, her paperwork is in order. She's approved to compete. You may contest it after the event." Boris turned to Anna. His voice was venom. "You lied." She met his eyes. "I never lied. You never asked." Before he could retort, Sergeant Wilson stepped forward from the crowd. "No one lied, Trafimov," he said. "Miss Morozova trained with me for over a year. She was hand-to-hand instructor in the Marine Corps. Her rank's not the problem here. Your ego is." The silence was deafening. Boris tried to recover. "She's never demonstrated anything close to black belt level." The coordinator's patience snapped. "Mr. Trafimov, this is your last warning. She meets qualifications. She is in. Move along." Boris stared, mouth open. Then the organizer added, "Actually, Mr. Trafimov, according to the revised bracket, you'll be her first match." Gasps, audible, immediate. Boris froze. The man who'd humiliated her, belittled her, pushed her aside, now stood directly in her path. His face shifted, from shock to dread to manufactured bravado. "This is ridiculous," he muttered, but it was done. The announcer's voice returned. "Next match, Boris Trafimov versus Anna Morozova." Mat Uchunja, the mat cleared. Cameras lifted. Spectators surged toward the edge. Even students from other academies came closer, drawn by the bizarre matchup. A black belt against a white belt? A man known for ruthlessness against a woman few had even seen spar? Anna stepped onto the mat, calm, almost meditative. She removed her warm-up jacket, revealing powerful arms and lean muscle hidden beneath her GI for months. Whispers spread. Claire's jaw dropped. She bowed to the referee, then to Boris. He barely returned it. The whistle blew. Boris charged, predictably, aggressively, dominance by intimidation. He grabbed her collar, aiming for a classic throw. She let him. Her foot shifted. Grip changed. In one fluid movement, she turned, trapped his arm, swept his leg, and dropped him flat. Gasps. Before he could react, she transitioned. Knee on belly, frame controlled, grip adjusted. Her arm snaked under his elbow. She had drilled this thousands of times. Timing, balance, precision. She locked the armbar. He panicked, slapped the mat, hard. The whistle shrieked. 14 seconds. The referee raised her hand. "Winner, Morozova." Gasps turned to roars. Boris scrambled up, red-faced, humiliated, ignoring her extended hand. He stormed off the mat, pushing past stunned teammates, refusing to look back. Anna bowed once more, then turned and walked off. Sergeant Wilson met her at the edge with a nod. "Outstanding. Your father would have been proud." She touched the tags beneath her collar. "Thank you, sir." As she passed the Apex team, Claire didn't speak. Her smugness was gone, replaced by something quieter. Shame? Respect? Anna didn't stop to examine it. She just kept walking. The rest of the tournament unfolded like a revelation. Anna advanced. Her technique was quiet but deadly. Her strategy was unorthodox. She won 2 more matches before losing in the semifinals to a seasoned world-ranked competitor. The woman hugged her after the match. "You've been hiding," she said, "but not anymore." By the end of the day, whispers had turned to statements. "Did you see her match? She submitted him in 14 seconds. Who trained her? Why was she still a white belt?" Videos went viral. Clips of the submission flooded social media. Instructors from other academies began questioning Apex's belt system. Complaints emerged. quiet ones, then louder. Maxwell Reed, one of the founders of Apex, took notice. He called a staff meeting. "We're reviewing the incident," he said. "Apex values respect and fairness." But behind closed doors, the talk was different. Applications dropped. Existing members threatened to quit. Parents questioned the environment. Emails flooded in. Boris was suspended. Officially, pending internal review. Unofficially, damage control. Anna returned to Apex once more. She entered quietly. Students parted. The ones who mocked her now watched with uncertainty. Maxwell met her at the entrance. "Can we talk?" She followed him into his office. "I want to apologize," he began. She said nothing. "I didn't know about your background or your qualifications." She raised an eyebrow. "I mean, I knew you had, experience, but not the extent. The Marine Corps? A hand-to-hand instructor? That changes everything." He offered a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "We'd like to offer you a position here. Instructor, self-defense courses, especially for women. Your story, it's powerful." There it was, the pivot, from mockery to marketing. Anna stood. "Thank you, but I've already accepted something else." She hadn't, yet, but she would. She bowed slightly and walked out. The next day, she submitted a formal resignation and requested a refund for her final month. They didn't argue. In the weeks that followed, she returned to her roots. The VA Rehab Center, veterans, women, real fighters. With help from Sergeant Wilson, she launched a new evening program. Jiu-Jitsu for recovery, 2 nights a week, small room, no glamour, just sweat, breath, and healing. Word spread. Wait lists formed. Among her first students, 2 female veterans recovering from trauma and surgery. One missing a leg, another haunted by night terrors. Anna worked with them gently, patiently. After one intense session, one of them pulled her aside. "You get it," she said. "This isn't about technique. It's about taking back control." Anna nodded. She wasn't teaching jiu-jitsu. She was teaching survival. Meanwhile, Boris fought back. He appealed the tournament results, claimed Anna had misrepresented her rank, but his own actions came under review. Multiple students, mostly women, stepped forward. Stories emerged: patterns, favoritism, harassment, intimidation. A regulating body opened an inquiry. His black belt remained intact, but his career, over. Maxwell issued a press release. Boris Trafimov is no longer affiliated with Apex. It was done. A month later, Anna sat at a cafe near the Commons. Same cafe as always. Same order. When Boris walked in, the place fell silent. He saw her at the counter. Approached. His voice was low, bitter. "You made me a joke." She turned slowly. "You made yourself a joke. You misled us." "I never lied. You never asked." She took her coffee, walked past him, left him standing there angry, exposed, alone. Their last conversation. Over time, Anna's program expanded. Word reached city health departments. Funding arrived. New locations opened. Veterans and civilians alike enrolled. Her students grew. So did she. She kept her job at the rehab center. Sergeant Wilson became her assistant instructor. They taught with respect, not authority. And every time she walked onto the mat, she wore her father's tags, this time on the outside of her GI. A symbol, not of war, but of legacy. When her students asked about the match that started it all, she kept it brief. "Yes," she'd say, 14 seconds. Then she'd point to the mat. "Now, let's learn something that might take longer." Because Anna Morozova wasn't just the woman who brought down a black belt in 14 seconds. She was the woman who knew what it meant to fall and rise and keep going. The air inside the VA Rehabilitation Center always carried the same muted scent, sterile, faintly medicinal, with a subtle undercurrent of sweat and weariness that no amount of cleaning could hide. It wasn't unpleasant. To Anna, it smelled like persistence, like survival, like home. That afternoon, she stood barefoot on the edge of the makeshift mat they'd laid down in the community hall, her black GE crisp and form-fitting, the army tags of her father resting just above her sternum, visible for all to see. The tag chain clinked softly as she exhaled. Around her, 6 students warmed up in silence. 3 women, 2 men, and 1 young man who couldn't have been more than 22. All veterans, all broken in some visible or invisible way. This was no Apex Academy. There was no fancy logo, no ranking belts framed on the walls, no motivational slogans screaming from posters. Just a gymnasium lit by flickering fluorescence, a scuffed linoleum floor, and a set of mats purchased through donations and city grants. But the energy in the room, quiet, resolute, open, was exactly what she dreamed of when she walked away from the prestige and posturing of her former life. She scanned her class. Teresa, a Marine vet who lost her leg to an IED in Syria, was adjusting the strap on her prosthesis with gritty focus. Marcus, an ex-Navy corpsman with a history of alcoholism and rage issues, worked methodically through a stretching routine, sweat already darkening the collar of his shirt. Lisa, Army Reserve, was the most timid, her PTSD still fresh, triggered by loud noises and sudden movements. But she kept showing up. She always showed up. Then there was Brian, the kid, former Air Force mechanic, dishonorably discharged for reasons Anna suspected had more to do with trauma than insubordination. He tried too hard, joked too much, but there was a deep longing in him to be seen, to be taught, to matter. Anna clapped her hands once. All right, let's start with breath. They formed a circle. She led them through the same breathing drills her father had taught her as a child when night terrors plagued her after boot camp stories became too vivid. 4 counts in, hold, 8 counts out. No one spoke. The room filled with the sound of steady air, deliberate, calming, grounding. Then came the rolls, controlled falls, shrimping, base drills. Nothing fancy, nothing flashy, just the essentials, the foundation of control. Sergeant Wilson arrived midway through the session, nodding at her from the doorway. He'd been helping more lately, serving as both a co-instructor and quiet anchor. He never undermined her authority, never tried to take over. He understood the mission. He understood her. After the warm-up, they broke into pairs. Anna moved between them, adjusting a grip here, a foot position there. When Lisa flinched during a drill, Anna crouched beside her and whispered, "We stop when you say stop. Not before. Not after. You're in control here." Lisa nodded, biting her lip. She continued. After class, while they sipped water and sat on the floor cooling down, Marcus asked what everyone else had been wondering. So what really happened with that Apex guy? I mean, we all saw the clip, but that wasn't just skill. That was something else. Anna smiled faintly, glancing at Wilson. He said nothing, just arched a brow. She took a moment before answering. He underestimated me, she said. That's all. It happens more than you think. But you destroyed him, Brian said. Like 14 seconds, boom, done. That was the finish, she said. The work took a lot longer, months, years, pain, repetition, showing up. That's the part no one sees. That's the part that matters. They nodded. Even Brian stayed quiet. The next day, Anna found an envelope taped to her office door. Handwritten, no return address. Inside was a letter, short, neat penmanship. Miss Morozova, I watched your match. Twice. 3 times, actually. I recognize the control, the discipline. I'm the director of the New England Veterans Outreach Initiative. We're trying to launch a pilot program combining martial arts with trauma recovery. Would you be willing to meet? We think your model could work statewide. Respectfully, Doctor. Andrea Whitaker. Anna stared at the letter for a long time. The meeting took place in a brownstone in Cambridge, repurposed into a wellness facility. Dr. Whitaker was a tall, graceful woman in her early 50s, with calm eyes and a voice like wind over water. Soothing, unhurried, precise. She wasn't military, but she understood the language of structure, trauma, and recovery. We've followed several pilot programs in the past, she explained, but yours is the first with this level of traction so early. I haven't done anything special, Anna replied. I just let them move. You let them matter, Whitaker said. That's different. They discussed logistics, space, funding. Whitaker offered access to additional facilities across Massachusetts and support staff, therapists, coordinators, liaisons. But she was careful not to impose. We want your voice at the center of this, she said. This started with you. Anna agreed, cautiously, but she felt something stir, a sense of mission, of movement beyond herself. She left the meeting with a binder full of forms and ideas, and the faintest seed of something she hadn't allowed herself in months. Hope. Within a month, the pilot expanded to 2 additional centers, one in Springfield, one in Lowell. Anna trained new instructors, veterans themselves, handpicked with Sergeant Wilson's help. She insisted on the same principles: consent, focus, breath, and community. Word spread. A local news outlet ran a segment on the program, then a second one. An invitation came from a university's psychology department. Would Anna give a talk on trauma-informed martial arts? She declined, then reconsidered. She stood in front of a lecture hall 3 weeks later, arms crossed, dog tags visible, voice quiet but unwavering. We don't teach people to fight, she said. We teach them not to freeze. The applause was thunderous. Meanwhile, Apex struggled. The shadow of Boris's misconduct still lingered. Maxwell Reed tried rebranding, restructuring. He implemented new codes of conduct, hired female instructors, launched inclusive campaigns. But the soul of the place had been stripped bare. The students who'd bullied Anna now whispered her name with confusion, guilt, and quiet reverence. Claire showed up at one of Anna's open seminars. Not in uniform, no makeup, just herself. I came to say sorry, she said. No excuses. I was awful. I know that. Anna studied her for a moment. Why now? Because I want to do better, and I want to help, if you'll let me. Anna nodded once. Claire stayed, volunteered, listened more than she spoke, and began her own healing. One cold Tuesday evening, as Anna locked up the Dorchester Center, she found a familiar figure waiting at the curb. Dennis, her ex-husband. He stood awkwardly beside a black sedan, hands in pockets. Hi. She didn't respond. I know you don't owe me anything, but I wanted to say I was wrong. About everything. She crossed her arms. About walking away? Or about blaming me for things you didn't understand? He looked down. Both? A long silence stretched between them. I saw what you did. The match, the program, the people you're helping. It made me realize what I couldn't handle back then had nothing to do with you. She didn't soften. Why are you here, Dennis? He hesitated. We're opening a new Apex branch. Different leadership. Clean slate. They asked if I'd help set it up. And I want you to be part of it. Lead it. Shape it. She laughed once. Quiet. Sad. You still don't get it. I'm trying, he said. She stepped closer. You think I fought to get back into that world? I fought to build a better one. He nodded slowly. Then maybe you can teach us how. She didn't give him an answer, but she handed him a flyer. Veterans Jiu-Jitsu Recovery Program, open enrollment. Then she walked away. By spring, the program had expanded to 3 states. Anna spent more time on the road, teaching, training, sharing. But she never left Boston. The Dorchester Center remained her command post, her sanctuary. Every Saturday, she ran a class just for women vets. Small, private, sacred. That's where she first met Naomi. Navy, honorable discharge, wheelchair-bound. Sharp mind, sharper tongue. You don't think I can spare, she said the first day. I don't think anything, Anna replied. Show me. Naomi did. They rolled. Modified drills, adaptive techniques, sweat, tears, laughter. By the end of the month, Naomi had built a following of her own. One evening after class, Anna stood outside watching the sky darken over the skyline. Wilson joined her, holding 2 paper cups of vending machine coffee. He handed her one. Long day, he asked. Good day, she said. He sipped. You ever miss it? The noise, the competition? Anna thought, then smiled. Number, I've never been more in the fight than I am right now. They stood in silence. Then he nodded at her tags. He'd be proud. She touched them. I hope so. 6 months after the Boston Open, Anna returned to her father's grave. The grass was overgrown. She knelt, laid a small stone, and beside it, a photograph. Her students, smiling, fighting, living. You were right, she whispered. It's not about the match, it's about the mission. A voice startled her. You're Rob's daughter, aren't you? An elderly man stood behind her with a cane and a worn Marine cap. I'm Richard. I served with your dad. Beirut. 83. They talked for an hour. He told her how her father saved his life. He never wanted recognition, Richard said. Just to do the job. Anna smiled. Neither do I. He looked at her with pride. You've got his eyes and his silence. That's where the power is. She drove home in silence. But inside her chest, something pulsed with clarity. Legacy, not just inherited, earned and shared. The rain in Boston had a way of erasing things. Chalk lines on the sidewalks, cigarette butts in gutters, the sharp smell of gasoline that clung to the early mornings. But it didn't erase the fatigue Anna felt when she walked into the rehabilitation center that Thursday. The last 48 hours had been relentless. 2 travel trainings, 3 back-to-back consultations with new veteran centers in Rhode Island, and a brutal 2-hour sparring session with Wilson that had left her right shoulder stiff and her knuckles scraped raw. But none of that compared to what waited in her inbox that morning: a formal legal summons. Boris Trafimov had filed a defamation lawsuit against her, citing deliberate misrepresentation of credentials, public humiliation, and damage to professional reputation. She stared at the document for nearly 10 minutes, the bold-fonted legalese pressing against her temples like a vice. Part of her wanted to laugh. Part of her wanted to scream. But instead, she folded the paper, slid it into her desk drawer, and went back to work. Because people were waiting. Real people, not egos dressed in guy jackets and smug smiles. That day's class had a special visitor, a 13-year-old girl named Riley, daughter of a female Iraq vet who'd recently joined the program. Riley had been bullied for months at school, isolated for being weird and too quiet. Her mother brought her not for the fighting, but for the grounding. Anna noticed her immediately. Small, wiry frame, big eyes that darted like a cornered animal's, and a quiet that didn't stem from shyness, but watchfulness. After class, Anna asked if she wanted to try a few drills. Riley nodded without a word. They worked through basic shrimping, then base posture, then wrist escapes. The girl was quick. Not just physically, mentally. She anticipated movement, read Anna's eyes, her shifts in weight. When they finished, Riley looked up and asked, "Can I come back tomorrow?" Anna smiled. "You can come back anytime you want." The next day, Riley returned. So did her mother. And slowly, a new dimension of Anna's mission began to take shape. Not just healing combat trauma, but preempting it, strengthening the next generation, giving them armor before the world took its first swing. But the lawsuit loomed. Her phone buzzed with messages from reporters, former Apex students, and even distant family members she hadn't spoken to in years. Everyone wanted to know, was it true? Had she lied about her credentials? Had she tricked the tournament board? Anna ignored them all. She let Wilson handle communications. He stood firm, reiterating her rank, her Marine background, her documented record. Still, Boris had his believers, especially in the more conservative corners of the martial arts community, where tradition often trumped merit. Online forums filled with debates, threads dissecting her every move in that 14-second match. Some even claiming it had been staged. Others painted her as a dishonest feminist radical trying to undermine male instructors. Anna didn't flinch, but she took precautions. She changed her route to the rehab center. She upgraded security at the Dorchester gym. One night, someone spray-painted slanderer on the outer wall. Wilson arrived early and scrubbed it clean before she even saw it. But she knew. The next day, she walked in wearing her full Marine dress uniform, ribbons, insignia, everything. She said nothing. Neither did her students. They didn't have to. 1 week later, a surprise came from an unexpected place. A coalition of veterans, instructors, and mental health professionals filed a countersuit on her behalf, citing malicious prosecution, slander, and systemic discrimination. They included testimony from students, fellow instructors, therapists, and even members of the Boston Open Committee. One of the most damning pieces of evidence came from inside Apex itself. A former assistant coach, now turned whistleblower, provided emails and voice recordings where Boris mocked Anna's background, discussed suppressing her advancement, and even referred to female students as distractions. The court of public opinion began to shift. News outlets that once questioned Anna now ran exposés on misogyny and martial arts. Podcasts interviewed her students. A viral video compilation surfaced. Clips of Anna teaching, comforting crying veterans, coaching amputees through drills, ending with the infamous 14-second victory. The video's title, "This is What Strength Looks Like." Within a week, it had 7 million views. But with fame came pressure. Anna began receiving invites from high-profile organizations, NPR, CNN, TEDx. She declined most of them, choosing instead to appear on a local PBS special where she could control the narrative. She sat in a simple chair, hands folded, dog tags resting outside her shirt. The interviewer asked gently, "What kept you going when everyone else seemed to be tearing you down?" Anna paused, then answered, "My father taught me that honor isn't something people give you. It's something you live, every day, even when no one's watching." The silence after her words was more powerful than any applause. Back at the center, things grew. Naomi's adaptive jiu-jitsu classes became a model for other programs. Claire began shadowing Wilson, slowly transitioning into an assistant role. Riley brought 2 friends from school, then 5. Anna created a youth mentorship program. They called it Operation Quiet Strength. Meanwhile, Apex bled. Students left, sponsors withdrew. Maxwell Reed stepped down, citing health reasons. The academy was sold to new ownership, who reached out to Anna with an olive branch and offered to name the new training hall after her. She declined politely. "I don't need a building, I need a movement." The lawsuit was dismissed in early spring. The judge ruled that Boris's case was entirely without merit, likely retaliatory in nature. In the final statement, the judge added, "The defendant's contributions to the veteran community and martial arts education are both measurable and significant. This court recognizes her as a credible, qualified expert in her field." That night, Wilson brought champagne. Anna drank water, but she smiled. A real smile, not tired, not defensive, just proud. A few weeks later, at a state martial arts conference, Anna stood beside Naomi and Claire as they presented their work on trauma-informed training. When asked about their methods, Anna said, "Technique is only as good as the trust it's built on. We train the body, yes, but we also listen to the soul." The room rose in a standing ovation. Afterward, an elderly man in a faded GI approached her. "My granddaughter wants to train. She's shy, lost her father in Afghanistan. Would you take her?" Anna took his hand. Of course. She took them all. That summer, the Department of Veterans Affairs announced a national partnership with her organization. Federal grants followed. Wilson went full-time. Claire received her teaching certification. Naomi was hired as an accessibility consultant. And Anna kept showing up. Every morning, every class, every new student. Her hands bore calluses, her joints stiffened more quickly now, but her eyes, they were clearer than ever. She rarely spoke of Boris anymore, or Apex, or the lawsuit. But the Army tags never left her chest, and the 14-second match was still mentioned, usually by others, rarely by her. One day Riley asked, "Do you ever think about that match? Like, really think about it?" Anna paused. "Only when I need to remember that." "Silence isn't weakness." Riley grinned. "Can you show me that move?" Anna raised an eyebrow. "I can show you the preparation. The rest is timing." And together they moved, slowly, carefully, deliberately, building not just skill, but something deeper, something that couldn't be broken by opinion, undone by ego, or silenced by power. Legacy. But this was only the beginning. The fall air in Boston carried a different texture now, less of the biting harshness that once haunted Anna's early morning routines, and more of a cold clarity that seemed to echo her new rhythm. Every step she took from her apartment to the center was familiar, but no longer tinged with tension. Her boots hit the sidewalk like metronomes, steady, focused, determined. Yet even in peace, shadows linger. The lawsuit had vanished. The public had shifted. The applause had been loud. But the silence that followed was heavier. Not the silence of neglect, but of expectation. Anna could feel it in the eyes of her students, the curious strangers who showed up just to watch a class, the veterans who nodded solemnly as she passed. Everyone seemed to be waiting for her to declare something, to plant a flag, to rise into something larger than a teacher, something closer to a symbol. But Anna had never cared for symbols. She cared for bruises that healed, for veterans who stopped flinching at sudden noises, for kids like Riley who now walked down hallways with their shoulders squared instead of hunched. One morning, while stretching on the mat before class, she noticed a letter slipped under the studio door. It was handwritten in pen on military-issue stationery. The envelope had no return address. Inside was a short message. "You saved my son's life. He doesn't talk about Afghanistan, but he talks about you. Thank you." It wasn't signed. Anna stared at the words for a long time, then folded the letter and tucked it behind her father's dog tags in her locker. The weight of it wasn't sadness. It was something else, a sense of inheritance. That same week, a new face appeared during sign-in. A man in his early 50s, lean frame, a tiredness behind his eyes that didn't come from physical pain. He introduced himself as Marcus Hale, former Delta Force, 2 tours in Syria, recently retired after a spinal injury ended his career. "I don't need a miracle," he said, "just a place where I'm not a ghost." Anna nodded. "We don't do miracles here, just sweat and stubbornness." He grinned. "That I can live with." Marcus wasn't like the others. He never asked questions, never commented on the 14-second match, never brought up Apex. But when Anna demonstrated a technique, he watched her with surgical precision, like someone decoding a map. One night, as they closed up the center, he lingered behind. "You trained in Okinawa, didn't you?" Anna froze for a second. Briefly. He nodded slowly. "You move like the old school types, linear, efficient, less flash, more cut." It wasn't a compliment, it was recognition. And for Anna, it meant something real. Over the following weeks, Marcus became part of the Corps. He stayed after class to mop floors, helped adjust the heating when the system failed, carried duffel bags for the students who couldn't. And when Riley asked who he was, Anna simply replied, "Someone who knows what silence costs." In the background, the program grew. A second building was leased in South Boston. A team of trauma-informed therapists volunteered to develop a full curriculum that combined martial training with structured mental recovery plans. Veterans Affairs added Anna's modules to their recommended recovery resources. A small documentary crew approached, offering to do a piece for PBS titled Reclaiming Ground. She reluctantly agreed on the condition that it not focus on her, but on her students. Filming began discreetly. One of the interviewees was Claire, who opened up for the first time on camera about the internalized misogyny in martial arts and how she herself had been blind to it until she saw Anna fight not with fists, but with silence. "She didn't need to humiliate anyone to win," Claire said. "She just did the work. That changed me." But with visibility came the return of old ghosts. One evening, Anna received an email from Dennis, her ex-husband, the man who once told her, "You never know when to quit." His tone this time was different, apologetic, even remorseful. He'd seen the PBS segment. He wrote, "I watched Riley. I watched the veterans. I watched you. I was wrong." She didn't reply. Some chapters don't get rewritten. But she didn't delete the email either. Meanwhile, Apex, under new management, invited her to their reopening ceremony. It was a hollow gesture meant for press photos. She declined, but she didn't burn the letter. She let it sit on her table, unopened, like a relic from a life that no longer required closure. Then, just as the leaves began to fall hard onto the cracked sidewalks of Dorchester, the next storm arrived, this time not from Boris or Apex or the media, but from inside the program. A veteran named Lisa Turner, a 3-tour Army combat medic, suffered a PTSD breakdown during a sparring session. One moment she was in a simple side control drill, the next she was screaming, fists flying, eyes wild. It took 3 people to restrain her. Anna sat with her for 2 hours afterward, just breathing. No words, no corrections, just presence. Lisa cried until her throat went hoarse. When she could finally speak, she whispered, I thought I was past this. Anna nodded. You're not broken. You're just remembering. And now we start again. But the incident sparked a conversation. Some parents were concerned. A few new students dropped out. A columnist for the Boston Herald published a think piece. Do combat veterans belong in community martial arts? It wasn't a direct attack, but the implications stung. Anna didn't respond publicly. Instead, she organized a panel, a public event called Training Through Trauma, where veterans, therapists, instructors, and even Riley's mom spoke about the importance of safe spaces for everyone, not just those who fit clean narratives. The event was standing room only. A retired Navy SEAL who had never publicly shared his struggles did so on stage, then embraced his daughter as she cried. Afterwards, someone asked Anna if she felt vindicated. No, she said. I just feel like we have work to do. And they did. More instructors, more classes, new pilot programs in Maine and New Jersey. Requests poured in, but the weight on Anna's shoulders grew heavier. Not in burnout, but in responsibility. She carried everyone's stories, everyone's battles. She couldn't afford to stumble. One evening, Marcus sat beside her after a long training session and said quietly, You know, leaders fall too. The trick is learning when to sit down before you fall on someone. She looked at him and asked, You offering to catch me? He smiled. Nope. I'm offering you a damn chair. She laughed, genuinely. That night she took the next morning off for the first time in months, slept in, walked by the river, didn't answer her phone, and it didn't fall apart without her. It ran, because she'd built something real, not dependent on her, but shaped by her. And that was the beginning of something even greater. Winter in Boston arrived with a sharpness that felt personal, as if the wind remembered who had dared to stand tall when it tried to push them down months before. Snow piled up along the curbs, but inside the community center, warmth radiated. Not from the heating vents, but from the bodies in motion, the laughter between drills, the slow, careful breathing during recovery. Anna moved among the mats like a steady pulse, adjusting posture here, correcting foot placement there, her presence silent but firm, like gravity. Her program had evolved beyond anything she'd imagined. 3 centers now fully operating, 2 more in early planning, with support not just from veterans organizations, but from progressive health groups, martial arts federations, and even a few skeptical city officials who had come to see that what Anna built wasn't just therapy or combat, it was dignity restored. But that dignity came at a price. Anna was exhausted, though she didn't admit it. Her days began at 5 a.m. with email triage, followed by administrative calls, then training, then student evaluations, meetings with therapists, grant interviews, late-night cleanups. Even with Marcus and a dozen other capable volunteers, everyone still turned to her for final approval. Last words, the signature that made it real. One evening after a particularly long day, she stood in the empty locker room staring into her own reflection, her face gaunt, eyes slightly bloodshot, jaw clenched. Her fingers found the dog tags hanging from her neck. She closed her eyes. Mission, not noise, she whispered her father's words, trying to breathe life into them again. But the noise was no longer outside. It was inside now. It followed her even in sleep. That same week, the center received a cease and desist letter, not from Apex, not from an enemy, but from the city's zoning board, citing an anonymous complaint about noise violations, capacity limits, and improper use of a wellness permit. Anna read it twice. It reeked of bureaucracy, but something about it felt targeted. She took the letter to Marcus. They're trying to shut us down, she said. He read it, exhaled slowly, and muttered, Someone's scared. Over the next few days, they scrambled. Lawyers were called, licenses were reviewed, therapists signed affidavits, students wrote testimonials. The board agreed to a public hearing, and that's when the real cost of exposure became clear. At the hearing, a man stood up, well-dressed in his 60s, with a clipped tone and an air of superiority. My daughter attended Apex, he said. She left because of troubling influences. I've seen the footage of Miss Morozova's match. I've read the interviews. Is this really the environment we want in our city? Veterans suffering from combat trauma? Physical aggression disguised as therapy? Anna didn't flinch. She waited. When it was her turn to speak, she stepped forward, looked the panel in the eye and said, "We don't teach violence. We teach control. We don't erase trauma. We help people live with it. We don't break people. We remind them they're already whole." Her voice was even, without anger, just truth. Behind her, Claire stood and spoke about transformation. Then Riley, now visibly more confident, addressed the room. "Before I came here, I was scared to walk alone. Now I'm teaching self-defense at my school." The board went quiet. The vote passed. The center could stay open. But something had shifted. Anna knew that the more they grew, the more resistance they'd face. Not from the streets, but from systems built to keep control in familiar hands. A few days later, Marcus approached her. "You need to disappear for a weekend." She blinked. "What?" He tossed her a set of keys. "Cabin in Vermont. No cell signal. Wood stove. Take 3 days. Or you're going to break something inside you that won't heal." She resisted at first. Then one Friday at dawn, she drove north. The cabin was small, quiet, surrounded by snow. She lit the stove, made coffee, and for the first time in years, allowed herself to do nothing. No drills, no emails, just silence. On the second day, she cried without knowing why. The release was sudden, like a dam bursting. Memories surged. Her father's funeral, the desert heat of Afghanistan, the hospital ceiling after the blast. Boris's smirk, the way Claire used to laugh cruelly, the sound of Riley calling her sensei, the veteran's eyes full of hope and fear. She cried until there was nothing left, and then she slept, deeply, dreamlessly. When she returned, the staff noticed something in her eyes. Not less fire, more clarity, like a blade that had been cleaned and sharpened. She held a staff meeting. "We're growing," she said. "We need to grow smarter. I'm stepping back from day-to-day decisions. Marcus will co-lead operations. Claire will head youth outreach. I'll focus on long-term development and the curriculum." They were stunned, then relieved, then proud. Anna wasn't leaving. She was leading. Differently. That spring, the city health department invited her to co-develop a citywide resilience initiative for schools and recovery centers. She declined at first. Then Riley approached her one day after class. "There's a girl at my school," Riley said. "Her brother hit her. She's scared. She asked if there's a place like this for people like her." That night, Anna emailed the department. "I'm in," she wrote, "but only if we center it around people like her." Soon, a pilot program launched across 3 public schools. Anna trained the trainers. The feedback was staggering. Attendance improved. Discipline incidents dropped. Students reported feeling safer. In private, a school counselor cried while thanking her. "You don't understand what this means for these kids." Anna did. She just didn't say it. She didn't have to. Her work spoke for her. That summer, she was invited to speak at a national symposium on trauma and recovery. She wore her simple GI, dog tags around her neck. On stage, she stood before doctors, educators, veterans, policymakers. "I'm not a therapist," she began. "I'm not a politician. I'm someone who survived. And survival teaches you that healing isn't always quiet. Sometimes it looks like sweat, like yelling, like crying between punches, but it's real. It's earned, and it's yours." She received a standing ovation. Later in the hallway, a woman approached. Older, elegant, tears in her eyes. "My son died in combat," she said. "I hated the military for a long time, but watching you, I saw something I hadn't seen in years. Purpose." Anna placed a hand on her shoulder. "It never goes away," she said, "but it doesn't have to stay a wound." The woman nodded, and they stood there for a moment, strangers connected by loss and strength. Back in Boston, Anna returned to her center, to her students, to the mats that had carried so many stories. The snow had melted. The air was soft now, and though her schedule remained full, her heart was lighter. Not because the battle was over, but because she finally understood. This wasn't just a fight for her dignity. It was a fight for all of them, and she wasn't alone anymore. The autumn came early that year, ushering in the kind of crisp, amber-tinted days that made Boston feel older than its skyline suggested, as though every red brick and rusted railing whispered stories of resistance and rebirth. For Anna Morozova, the season marked another transition, not just in the weather, but in the rhythm of her work and the reach of her impact. The centers were thriving, humming with activity. Mothers in their 40s learning break falls beside 20-year-old combat vets. Teenagers from troubled schools locking eyes with their partners and discovering the sacred trust of sparring, and older men recovering from surgery, slowly learning how to move again without fear. What Anna had built was no longer just hers. It was a movement. But movements, like soldiers, needed direction. One afternoon after class, Marcus handed her an envelope. "You've been nominated," he said, his smile teasing but proud, "for the National Valor Fellowship. It's competitive, political, but it comes with real funding. 500,000. Anna stared at the envelope. "I didn't apply." Marcus shrugged. "Someone did. Probably Claire, or Riley, or maybe half the city." The award was meant for leaders redefining civic service in post-crisis America. It wasn't something she sought, but the potential it held, the ability to scale her curriculum, train more instructors, integrate trauma-sensitive martial arts into national recovery programs, was undeniable. That night, alone in her apartment, Anna laid out the application, filled it in slowly, methodically, her handwriting calm and deliberate. Under personal mission, she wrote only one sentence: to ensure that no one feels powerless where they should feel strong. Weeks later, the acceptance arrived. She was to speak at the National Summit in Washington, D.C., alongside scientists, journalists, reformers. The event was grander than anything Anna had experienced. White tablecloths, formal wear, security detail, media. But she wore what she always wore: her GI, her dog tags, and her stillness. When her name was called, applause rose quickly. She stepped up, nodded respectfully, and said nothing for a long 5 seconds. Then, "My name is Anna Morozova. I used to believe silence was safety, that staying invisible meant staying intact. But silence is also surrender. And for those who've endured violence, whether in war zones or their own homes, silence is the sound of being forgotten. What we built in Boston isn't a dojo. It's a lifeline. It's a second chance. And it's proof that strength doesn't come from domination, but from healing." Her voice didn't tremble, and when she stepped down, people stood, some wiping tears, others clapping furiously. After the event, a tall woman in a gray suit approached her. "I'm from the Department of Defense," she said. "We've been watching your work, quietly. We'd like to talk about integrating it into our recovery units for returning service members." Anna blinked. "That's a big system." The woman nodded. "But big systems need new hearts. You might be one." Over the following months, Anna's schedule grew denser. She visited bases, met with therapists, revised her training modules into digestible programs. And yet, every Thursday, she still returned to her center in Dorchester. Still led warm-ups, still cleaned mats, still watched newcomers walk in with hollow eyes and walk out standing straighter. One Thursday evening, while stretching beside Riley, Anna noticed a girl sitting on the bench by the lockers, her hoodie too large, hands stuffed deep in the sleeves. Anna approached. "First time?" The girl didn't answer, just nodded slightly. "It's okay," Anna said. "You can watch tonight. Or join. No pressure." She walked away, leaving the invitation hanging like open air. By the end of class, the girl had moved closer to the mats. The next week, she stepped onto them. Her name was Zoya, 14, quiet, but her eyes fierce. Anna recognized that look. A week later, Zoya was paired with Claire for drills. By the end, Claire pulled Anna aside. "She's better than she knows," she whispered, "and she's holding something in." Anna nodded. "Give her space. But watch her hands. That's where the truth shows first." Over the weeks, Zoya opened up, not with words, but with discipline. She showed up early, stayed late, repeated drills obsessively. One evening, she asked Anna softly, "Can I stay after and help clean?" That's when Anna knew. Zoya had begun to belong. Around this time, an investigative journalist reached out. He'd been covering systemic abuse in martial arts academies across the East Coast. and Apex had come up repeatedly. He wanted to talk about Boris. Anna hesitated. The past, after all, was no longer her weight to carry. But then she remembered the students still training under fear, the girls too afraid to speak. She agreed. The article, published 2 weeks later, named names, quoted documents, cited testimonies, including her own. Boris's last grip on reputation crumbled. The governing body of his certification formally revoked his license. He left the city. No one knew where. No one asked. The silence he had once enforced now enveloped him. Meanwhile, Anna received an email from her ex-husband, Dennis. "I saw the article. I saw the summit. I saw you." That's all it said. She didn't respond. There was nothing left to salvage. Some fires don't destroy. They simply burn away what no longer serves. That winter, the first snowfall arrived during class. Students watched the flakes through the windows, smiling. Anna called a break, and they ran outside, laughing, play fighting in the snow. Anna stood under the awning, arms crossed, a rare smile tugging her lips. Marcus appeared beside her. "We should close early," he said. "Celebrate?" Anna glanced at the scene. Zoya wrestling Riley into a snowbank, Claire helping an older vet back up after a fall. She nodded. "Yeah, let's celebrate." They ordered pizza, turned on music. The mats became a dance floor. For a few hours the weight lifted. Anna danced too, stiffly at first, then with abandon. Zoya filmed it, posted it online. The video went viral, not because of choreography, but because of what people saw. A warrior laughing, a survivor alive. Comments flooded in. One read, "I want my daughter to grow up like her." Another, "Now I believe healing is real." That night, Anna sat alone, watching the snowfall outside her apartment window. The city was quiet, blanketed in white. She held the dog tags, her fingers brushing the worn edges. She thought of her father, of his hands, his voice, of the first time he told her, "Pain will change you. Don't let it decide who you become." She whispered, "I didn't, Papa." And the snow kept falling, soft and relentless, like time, like forgiveness, like the peace that follows a battle finally laid to rest. Spring came with a sharpness in the air, like the city itself was shaking off the weight of winter's silence and stretching towards something new, something alive. And in the heart of Boston, Anna Morosova's center was no longer just a facility. It had become a heartbeat, steady and resolute, pulsing with the power of recovery and resilience. The waiting list had doubled, then tripled, as people from across the state, veterans, trauma survivors, overworked nurses, battered teenagers, and even once skeptical police cadets, came in search of something they couldn't quite define, but knew they desperately needed. And Anna met each new face with the same calm steadiness, her hands scarred and strong, her gaze unwavering, and always, always, those dog tags resting above her heart like a silent vow. The Department of Veterans Affairs began sending regular delegations, hoping to replicate her model in other cities. And while she provided all materials, Anna was careful to remind them that her success didn't come from curriculum, but from culture, from refusing to turn pain into shame, from letting people grow at their own speed, from refusing to weaponize discipline as humiliation. And it was this truth, not the branding or efficiency, that made her methods powerful. One day in April, after a particularly grueling session with a group of amputee veterans learning modified throws, Anna found Zoya sitting alone in the locker room, clutching something in her hand, a folded letter. And when Anna gently sat beside her, the girl's lips trembled before she whispered, "My mom, she's coming out of rehab. She wants me to move back in." And though there was hope in her voice, there was also fear. The kind of fear that people feel when they're finally offered something they've longed for, but can't trust it yet. And Anna placed a hand over Zoya's and said, "You decide what's safe, Zoya. Not guilt, not history. You." That moment, small and quiet, was one of 100 that week, because healing wasn't a single victory, but 1,000 tiny choices. To stay, to rise, to speak. And Anna, now increasingly viewed as a community leader, was invited to testify before the Massachusetts State Senate on integrating trauma-informed physical education into public schools. She stood before the panel in her plain clothes without titles or theatrics and told them plainly, "We're training kids to memorize rules. We should be teaching them to feel safe in their own skin. That's where learning begins." And her words again sparked national attention, with NPR, PBS, and independent journalists running pieces about her journey, not for sensationalism, but for something rarer: substance. Meanwhile, Apex Academy continued to unravel quietly, a slow bleed, as more former students came forward, as trust deteriorated from the inside, and as Maxwell Reed, once the face of authority, issued a public statement admitting the Academy's failures, not as a grand moral reckoning, but as a desperate measure to retain sponsors. But the community no longer cared. They'd moved on, and many of the Academy's former students now trained under Anna, not because of marketing, but because they saw in her the kind of teacher who didn't need to raise her voice to command a room. One afternoon, a woman named Tanya arrived, limping slightly, scars visible on her neck, and during intake, she revealed she'd survived domestic abuse, relocated across states, and was now rebuilding her life. Anna assigned her to Claire for basics and watched as the once cruel student guided Tanya with gentleness and patience. The past burned away by choice, by humility, and Anna felt something inside her ease, a small measure of peace, as she saw the chain of change extend beyond her own hands. In late spring, Anna received a call from Richard Townsend, the aging Marine who had served with her father, inviting her to a memorial event in Philadelphia, honoring those who had fallen in Lebanon, including her father. And though hesitant to leave her students, she agreed, sensing that there were still threads of her story left to be sewn into closure. She traveled by train, the countryside rolling past like pages in a fading book. And when she arrived at the memorial, she was met by aging veterans in pressed uniforms, by wives holding photographs, by children carrying names they never got to meet. And when her name was announced, she stepped forward, spoke briefly, her voice catching only once as she said, "He taught me that honor isn't a flag or a title. It's a daily decision to show up, even when no one salutes you." And when the crowd rose in applause, she knew it wasn't just for her father, but for every quiet fight fought without recognition. Returning home, she found the center had managed just fine in her absence. Marcus and Wilson had handled logistics, Claire had run classes, Zoya had even taught her first beginner warm-up. And for the first time, Anna realized the program could survive without her, that her role had shifted from soldier to steward. And just as she began planning a new summer initiative, outdoor training programs for underserved neighborhoods, she received a strange request. A local art museum wanted to feature her center in an exhibit about modern American heroism, and though she declined personal photography, she allowed the exhibit to include silhouettes of training, audio clips of veteran testimonies, and her father's quote etched on the wall: "Focus on the mission, not the noise." And when the exhibit opened, visitors walked silently through it, moved not by violence or victory, but by the subtle power of resilience, quietly chosen again and again. Months passed, and Anna's days were filled with mats and meetings, with early morning classes and late-night reflections. And one Saturday, while walking through the South End, she passed a self-defense flyer on a lamppost with a familiar name, Claire, now teaching her own program at a women's shelter. And in that moment, Anna smiled to herself, because she understood something vital. Legacy doesn't shout, it echoes. Through those we lift, through the systems we change, through the moments we never write about, but which carry people through darkness like a rope in the fog. And on the anniversary of her center's founding, they held a small gathering. No banners, no fanfare, just shared food, open mats, and a wall where students could pin notes titled, "What This Place Means to Me." And Anna, walking by quietly, read them. "I found my voice. I stopped hiding my scars. I realized I matter." And she felt something tighten in her chest, not pain but gratitude, as she stepped into the middle of the room and simply bowed. The kind of bow that meant thank you, the kind that warriors give each other when words no longer carry enough weight. That night, after everyone had gone, Anna stayed late to clean, her hands moving slowly over the mats, as if absorbing the stories left in every corner. And when she turned off the lights and locked the door behind her, she didn't look back, because she didn't need to. What she'd built wasn't inside that building anymore. It was everywhere now, rippling outward, a quiet revolution carried in the breath and posture of those once broken and now standing. The humid breath of summer settled over Boston like a weighted blanket, thick and slow. But within the walls of Anna Morozova's rehabilitation program, the heat only amplified the pulse of dedication running through every corner. From the sweat-drenched mats to the clatter of crutches, braces, and prosthetics echoing through the hallways as her students trained, healed, and returned again and again, not out of obligation, but out of something deeper, something that defied words. And in those rooms, under the watchful eye of Anna and her growing team of instructors, people learned to confront not just their physical limits, but the ghosts that had followed them home from war zones, hospital beds, prison yards, and childhoods that had offered more pain than shelter. It was mid-July when Anna received a letter stamped with the emblem of a federal agency, the Department of Defense. And while her heart skipped from instinctive tension, the contents were neither disciplinary nor ceremonial, but something unexpected. An invitation to consult on the creation of a new nationwide veteran reintegration protocol, not for the battlefield, but for after it, a way to bring dignity, autonomy, and purpose back to those discarded by systems that praised them one year and forgot them the next. The honor was undeniable, but Anna hesitated, aware of how often institutions used heroes as props, not partners. And it was only after a long conversation with Sergeant Wilson who reminded her that real change only happens when people like us stop sitting in the back row, that she agreed to attend a series of pilot discussions in D.C., leaving the center for a week in the hands of Marcus and Claire. What she found there was a chaotic swirl of suits, egos, and buzzwords, the polished machinery of bureaucracy, but also, quietly, the flicker of sincerity in the eyes of a few survivors like her, now working behind desks, hoping to build bridges out of rubble. And Anna, armed with no title other than experience, dismantled jargon with clarity, insisting, "You can't fix trauma with policy unless the policy understands what trauma feels like." And by the end of the summit, she'd been asked to lead a task force on trauma-informed physical recovery, a move that would eventually shape national programming for decades to come. Back home, things had not slowed. The center had just opened its third location in Roxbury, serving primarily low-income youth, many of whom carried emotional burdens heavier than their gym bags. And Anna, ever present, insisted on personally leading one beginner class each week at every location. Not for optics, but because, as she often said, the first day someone shows up, that's the most sacred moment. And it was during one of those classes that she met Darian, a 15-year-old with a permanently clenched jaw and a gaze like a locked door, who refused to speak for 3 weeks but never missed a session until one afternoon, after practicing Breck Falls in silence, he muttered to Anna, "I don't flinch no more." And though it was just 5 words, she felt the full force of what they meant and simply nodded, knowing better than to ruin it with praise. By August, her influence had reached circles far beyond martial arts, mental health organizations, social justice groups, and even university research teams studying post-traumatic growth. And though recognition came, Anna rarely accepted awards, instead forwarding nominations to her students or team, and always reminding people, this isn't about me, it's about who we become when we stop being ashamed of where we've been. And her humility, fierce and deliberate, made her an anomaly in a world addicted to self-promotion. One rainy night, as she walked alone after closing the center, Anna passed the now-defunct building that once housed Apex Academy, shuttered after public fallout and lawsuits, its windows dark, its signage removed, a hollow skeleton of the place where she was once dismissed, ridiculed, and nearly broken. And as she stood across the street watching the rain-carved lines down the empty facade, she felt no anger, only a quiet relief, as if the building had finally surrendered its ghosts. Inside her apartment, photos lined the wall. Not of victories or medals, but of people. Zoya with her art therapy students, Marcus leading a class of amputees, Tanya volunteering at a shelter, Claire giving a TEDx talk about shame and resilience, each one a ripple of the stone Anna had thrown into the world. And at the center of it all, above her kitchen table, was a framed photo of her father in uniform. A worn quote taped below, "Mission over noise," a mantra that had now passed into dozens of hearts like an underground current. But the work came with cost. Her sleep was shallow, interrupted by dreams of desert winds and tourniquets, of blood and breath, and the sudden silence that follows a blast. And though she never spoke of it, Sergeant Wilson knew the signs. And one night after class, he brought her tea and said, "You don't have to outrun the past, Anna. Just don't let it dictate your pace." And she didn't answer, just reached over and squeezed his hand, both of them sitting in the stillness with the kind of intimacy that doesn't need words. September arrived with a spike in enrollment and a new partnership with a local university to offer scholarships to students who had completed her trauma certification program. And the first recipient, a young woman named Dina, who had once flinched at her own reflection, now stood confidently at the front of a classroom using martial arts to teach conflict resolution to first-year college students. And when Anna visited her, she wept quietly in the back, because watching others become what they once thought impossible was its own kind of sacred. On the anniversary of her father's death, Anna returned to his grave again, this time with Claire, Wilson, and four of her students who had never known him but carried his legacy in their posture. And as they placed dog tags and letters beside his headstone, Wilson quietly said, "He didn't just raise a warrior, he raised a lighthouse." And no one spoke after that because there was nothing more to say. That night back in Boston, Anna stood in the middle of her center's main training room, the lights dim, the mats empty, and closed her eyes, remembering the humiliation, the doubts, the weight of loneliness she once carried like armor. And then she opened them again and saw not ghosts, but growth. And with a deep breath, she knelt and placed her hand on the floor, whispering a quiet prayer. Not to be strong, but to stay true, no matter what came next. The first snow of winter arrived early in Boston, soft flakes brushing against the window panes of the Dorchester Rehabilitation Center, like the quiet tapping of old memories asking to be let in. And inside, Anna Morosova moved slowly through the now expanded facility, observing a group of veterans in mid-exercise, their movements deliberate, their effort etched into the very air. Not for speed, not for power, but for healing, each motion a word in a language of survival they had learned together. And as Anna passed them, her gaze paused on the reflection in the mirror. Herself, standing taller than she used to, softer perhaps, but no less solid. Her dog tags now permanently worn over her. Not as decoration, but as declaration. She had learned to speak less but say more, and though her body bore the same scars, her voice now carried a weight that made even those in power pause when she entered a room. Across the city, the programs she built continued to flourish. 3 centers, over 200 active participants, a wait list of nearly 100, in collaborations with both the Department of Veterans Affairs and civilian hospitals that had never before considered martial arts as medical therapy. And yet for Anna, none of it felt like success in the traditional sense. It was simply the work. And the more it grew, the more she focused inward, not outward, measuring impact not in metrics, but in faces, in moments, in the steady reawakening of people who had once stopped hoping for more. Her daily life was quieter now. Early mornings alone in the kitchen, making coffee while reading old letters from her father. Long walks by the Charles River with Sergeant Wilson, who had become both friend and steady presence. And evenings spent journaling not for publication, but as a personal archive of what it meant to rebuild a life from splinters. Yet it wasn't peace in the traditional sense. The past still visited her, uninvited, in shadows and sudden silences, in the way a certain sound could bring her back to Afghanistan, or a certain question could pull the breath from her lungs. But she no longer ran from it. Instead, she met it eye to eye, the way a warrior greets another on neutral ground. One morning, as frost bit the windows, she received a letter from a high school in Pennsylvania, her father's old school, inviting her to speak at an event honoring local veterans. And though she initially hesitated, something about the gesture felt like a bridge she needed to walk. So she accepted and traveled to her hometown with a worn duffel, a copy of her father's service photo, and nothing rehearsed. When she stood before that crowd, students, teachers, and neighbors, she didn't tell a tale of medals or matches, didn't dramatize or simplify, but instead shared what her father once told her. That courage isn't a moment, it's a decision you make quietly, every day, especially when no one is watching. And when she finished, the silence that followed was the kind that lingers, not out of confusion, but reverence. And in the front row, a teenage girl was small, pale, wearing a hoodie too big for her, raised her hand and asked, "But what if you don't know who you are yet?" And Anna, without pause, replied, "Then you start with what you don't want to become and build from there." And that sentence, simple and unplanned, would later appear graffitied on walls and printed on flyers, a quiet ripple she never meant to start. Back in Boston, her life entered a new rhythm, not slower, but deeper. And as more invitations arrived for interviews, panels, podcasts, she turned most of them down, choosing instead to mentor others who were ready to speak, to lead, to rise. And it was during this time that Claire officially became co-director of the Women's Trauma Initiative, a position she had earned not through favoritism, but through grit, growth, and her unwavering ability to admit when she was wrong, a trait Anna admired most. Wilson, now fully retired from active instruction, still visited weekly, sometimes with baked goods, sometimes just to sit in silence. And together they planned the next evolution of the program, a mobile training unit to bring healing to those too isolated to come to them. Rural vets, survivors of domestic abuse, newly released prisoners, anyone who needed to remember they had a body and that it still belonged to them. That spring, the unit launched under the name Project Resurge, and within months it reached 6 towns and over 200 people, several of whom wrote letters that Anna kept in a drawer beneath her desk. Handwritten testimonies of reclaimed strength, dignity, and self-worth, none of which ever made it into press releases or newsletters, but meant more than any award ever could. Still, not everything healed. Some wounds simply became part of the architecture. And on certain nights, Anna found herself lying awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the ghosts of her old platoon, or hearing her ex-husband's words in the back of her mind. Not with pain, but as echoes that reminded her how far she'd come. One rainy afternoon, as she prepared for a workshop at the main center, she was approached by a young man, tall, nervous, wearing an old Apex t-shirt, who introduced himself as Jonah, one of Boris's former students, now a student at Northeastern studying psychology, and he asked carefully if she would consider sitting for a research project he was doing on leadership through adversity. And Anna, sensing no angle or agenda, agreed. During the interview, he asked, "When did you first know it wasn't about proving yourself anymore?" And she smiled faintly, answering, "When I realized that proving something to others is just a louder version of trying to convince yourself." And when the project was published, it was that quote that drew the most attention, shared across forums, classrooms, and veteran support groups. Though Anna never mentioned it, never reposted it, never needed to. Months later, Jonah joined the center as a volunteer counselor, and his empathy, informed by years of confusion and guilt under Boris's toxic tutelage, made him a vital part of the team, proof that people could grow not in spite of where they came from, but because of how far they chose to go. As the second winter approached, Anna began to draft a curriculum, not just for instructors, but for survivors, a guide that fused her father's principles with her own journey, blending discipline and softness, technique and emotion, silence and strength. And though it was never intended for publication, copies quietly circulated among organizations, academies, and community centers nationwide. And then one day quietly the call came, not from a reporter or a sponsor, but from the mother of a girl who had once tried to end her life and was now attending Anna's trauma resilience class 3 times a week. She just wanted to say thank you, not for saving her daughter, but for showing her how to save herself. And as Anna hung up, tears came, not from pain or exhaustion or pride, But from a sudden, overwhelming clarity, this was it. The mission, the moment, the reason none of it was wasted. Standing in the dusk light of the empty training hall, Anna walked slowly to the center of the mat, sat down cross-legged, and let the silence embrace her. Not a void, but a fullness. The hum of everything and everyone she had carried, lifted, fought, and forgiven, all of it held inside her like a quiet fire that would never burn out. She reached into her gi, touched the dog tags resting on her chest, and whispered, "I'm still here, Dad." And in that whisper was a world, not a conclusion, but a continuation. Because for people like Anna, there are no endings, only chapters. And with each breath, each class, each person who walks through those doors and dares to believe again, the story grows, not louder, but truer, etched not in stone, but in lives reclaimed, strength restored, and legacies rewritten.